Hey everybody, welcome to Quest for Peace. I'm Ayaz Akhtar, and if you're still watching this, that means I'm still on a quest for peace. It's been 7 years now, and still not there, but I'm getting there. I've been talking to lots of friends lately, trying to figure out what exactly they do to get peaceful, and we shot a whole bunch of this stuff at once, so my brain is mush. So of course, since my brain is mush, I bring on future me, a person who's basically me 9 years in the future because I'm doing all his old jobs. Because why the hell not? We got Tom Merritt on. Hey, Tom.
Hello, Ayaz.
How are you?
I am future you. I'm good, man.
Why do I sound like? Why do I sound like?
I don't know. Well, you made it sound like it was so far in the future.
Well, no,
I imagined a wizened old Ayaz with a stick.
Why would I end up with that accent? That was the question. That's my only question.
Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Why you ended up with that accent?
That's just the way we talk in the future.
It was probably some kind of vocal transplant.
That's the way it works. Okay, so Tom,
Internet of Things.
Not that people really need this, but if people don't know you, could you tell people about yourself?
I am Ayaz Akhtar 9 years later. I'm a podcaster. I do Daily Tech News Show. It's my main show. I also do a show called Sword and Laser, which is about science fiction and fantasy books. Cord Killers, about cord cutting and watching TV and movies. And Current Geek, which is all about geeky topics in the news. Those are all weeklies, and Daily Tech News Show, as the name says, is daily.
Okay, so then let's see. What should we hit today? We've done a previous episode a while ago, and I noticed you're wearing a hat.
Yeah, you still haven't found peace since that episode?
Well, you think that I would get there. Where am I with peace? So since our last episode, when Tom and I did a show at gfqnetwork.com, so if you want to see the old episode, go there. Look for Quest for Peace under the shows section. I think you're like my second or third guest. I moved to New York. You know about this?
Yeah, I actually met you in New York in October, and we went to Dunkin' Donuts.
That was you, right? Future me. I keep forgetting about it.
It was
this.
Me the whole time.
It's the hat.
I'll take off the hat and reveal.
It's throwing me off, man. The hat's really throwing me off. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the interest of transparency. My hair is a mess this morning, so that's why the hat's on.
Okay, I thought it was I for Ayaz. I'm like, cool. This is such a rah thing.
Actually, that's kind of. I didn't even think about that. Yes, totally.
That's the thing. In the future, you're gonna remember that.
Right.
Yeah. So I moved to New York. I dragged a California girl with me, and and I have my son a lot more. So that peace thing, if I had anything going in California, some shifting happened, right? So that takes a while to readjust. So
Earthquakes.
There's a lack of them here. So
Yeah.
That's part of it. That's why I haven't found peace just yet. Anyway, I should be asking you questions. You're asking me questions.
Yeah, sorry. I sort of turned into old habits, turned into the interviewer. So, Ayaz, tell me about your peace.
I will tell you about my peace. My peace is not working so well. Well, my earpiece isn't actually, technically. That's why I'm fiddling with this thing. Anyway.
Oh, I was under the misimpression of this show the entire time. It's a quest for a working earpiece.
So yeah, if you guys don't know, Tom and I are friends. Can you figure? Because this is
you hopefully caught on to that by now.
Anyway, so that's something I want to dispel for anybody who thought we are some kind of like we combat. We do like to combat, we like to argue and discuss, and that's what people do, right? This is something I wanted to ask you about because I am bad at humaning, and since you are me in some respects, and you do seem to understand arguing with somebody without it getting personal. How do you manage that line? Because I love arguing points to death. I used to do this with my dad. I used to fight with him about not facts, but just different points of view. And at the end of the day, we could just go out and have a meal. It's not a big deal. My older brother always found that to be very disrespectful. Be like, how could you argue with our father? I'm like, because he's got a brain. I want to know what he thinks. That's all I wanted to do to learn that way. How do you balance what appears to be a love of argument with, I don't know, being a likable fellow?
Well, hopefully I do it well. I don't know, but two things come to mind. One is I often think that my love of podcasting, especially doing podcasts that are discussions like this one, comes from conversations I would have with my grandpa. My grandpa Carl was plant accountant at American Can Company. He had pulled himself up by his bootstraps from the mailroom when he had lied about his age to get a job, all the way up to becoming an accountant without ever going to college. And he was an incredibly smart guy. So I would go over to his house. By the time I was young, he lived in the same town as us in Greenville, Illinois, and lived right up the street. And we would just sit and we would talk about politics and news and the world. And I always wanted to argue with him about things. And he was a very strong personality and the kind of person who could get, could very forceful. And so I sort of cut my teeth on figuring out, like, how could I make my point to Grandpa Carl? And then that fast forward to Buzz Out Loud, which is, I think, where I came up with my other strategy, or where I learned anyway, how to argue with someone so that they don't get their feelings hurt. Molly Wood and I would lock horns, and we talked about this on the recent Buzz Out Loud reunion. Sometimes it would be like we would lock horns, we would finish the show, and we'd be like, hey, it's great that we can have these like intense discussions and then walk away friends. But after a while, it started to become an issue, and we had to learn, like, where's the line? And I think that's the key, is understanding that not everybody likes to argue in the same way or in the same level of intensity. So you have to get to know the person on the other side of the argument. Now, if you're just, having a different person on a show every day, that means you're going to hold that line pretty far back. But you and I, we got to know each other, and I started to realize, oh, well, I as a person who likes to lock horns this way, and so I would take it farther with you than I would with maybe somebody else. And then, and yeah, when you're on public, when you're on a show that people watch, they don't know where that line is between the two people. And so they start to wonder, like, wow, did those guys actually like fight like that for real? But yeah, it's different with every person.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite questions was, why do you hate Tom? It's like, I don't. I quite like him, actually. He's fun to argue with. And, like,
I would get the, like, why are you so disrespectful to Ayaz?
Well, that happened anyway. I mean, you'd always like constantly like push me down, throw sand in my face, call me not a real man. It was a very odd Charles Atlas
buddy.
kind of thing.
Appreciate you clearing that up. Like, oh no, that part was totally real.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean,
no, and it was just perception of people, like, because I was the main host, if I disagreed with Ayaz, it was me being pushy and disrespectful and aggressive. If Ayaz disagreed with me, then it was him not liking me. And in fact, all it was in some cases not even disagreeing, but just deciding to explore an issue, right? Like just saying, oh, well, you're going to take that side, let me take this side and see where it goes.
Yeah, and the other thing is like just hearing an idea be brought out to its conclusion and like, here's the argument I see, and let's find some flaws with it. And if you find them first, that's fine. I don't have to defend it to the death. What difference does it make? Anyway, let's see. We're talking about intensity, right? Now, that's been a word to describe me for a very long time. I got a job a long time ago, back when I was a research assistant. And within about 20 seconds of being hired, I was told by my professor, you're very intense, aren't you? Now, do you have any idea why I give off that vibe, and how do you mask that?
I don't know. It's a weird thing to tell someone who you think is being intense that they're being intense. It's almost like, do you realize? I think that maybe the thing is to be like, do you realize how you're coming across? Because that's a real hard one. What it is generally people like to drop stuff quickly, right? If they sense tension or conflict, it's not worth getting into it about. And sometimes you really drive at a point. You're like, no, I want to understand this. And it's difficult for some people to recognize that that's just you getting kind of single-minded and focused, right? And I have the same thing where I will have to realize myself, okay, I recognize that person is starting to stare at me as if I have three heads. I am probably overdoing it on this point, and let me back off a little bit and maybe change the topic or crack a joke to lighten the mood. Because I think some people realize, they're just not as interested in whatever it is that you're being intense about, maybe.
Well, how do you recognize that point? I'm thinking that I've gotten better at it, but you seem to be very good at that. How exactly... Like, what are you looking for in cues? I mean, I talked about this in other shows. I'm pretty bad at not reading people, but putting myself in their shoes. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you want to argue this long? Duh. Like, everyone wants to do that, right? It's a very immature attitude, actually. So what a child thinks, like, oh, I like oranges. You must love oranges. We all love oranges, right? How do you get...
How do you deal with the orange haters of the world?
How, Tom?
I don't know, man. You say I'm good at it. I hope I'm better at it. I haven't always been very good at it, but it is making an effort to pay attention to the other person and not yourself, right? If you're like, I like oranges, we should talk about oranges. That's all very inward directed. It's all about you. What you have to do is look at the other person and go, huh, they're not saying anything, or what they're saying is very short and not very interesting, or their tone is starting to get defensive, uh, or they're just walking away. Come back. I want to talk about oranges. It's those kinds of things. When you see that the person isn't leaning in, they're not making eye contact, they're not exploring the topic anymore. I guess I don't know. I'm just coming up with that stuff off the top of my head, though.
Well, that's good. I mean, we haven't prepared anything with this episode, and I have no idea. I've got a couple of questions I do want to ask you, though, because I don't know if these are even appropriate. So if you say you don't want to talk about it, you can just say pass. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So we've worked together in the past.
Pass.
Damn it. We've worked together in the past. Don't.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
In the past. And I've seen you sometimes get irritated, but you get irritated for like all of 3 seconds, and then you switch back right away when necessary. And like it's not like you stay angry. Like I used to, when I get upset, I'd stay angry and plateau for a while, and then come back down, kind of chill out.
Yeah.
But you get like a spike, and it goes away so damn fast. And now I've explained all that. You can't pass through that one. Sorry.
It doesn't, though. I mean, that's the secret. Is I have worked very hard for a long time to not let irritation and anger overtake things, because it doesn't end up helping. And that's just experience and paying attention to yourself. I think it's saying, like, all right, I'm irritated by this, but let me set that aside for a moment. I don't know. I've always been the kind of person, I think naturally too, I have an advantage. Sometimes human beings like to take their natural advantages and turn them into virtues. And I think I might be bordering on that, because I've always had a natural tendency to flare up and then let it go. Like I don't hold grudges very often. Not that I've never held a grudge, but it's harder for me to hold a grudge. It's just a personality trait. And so that helps. But even then, like sometimes when I'm still feeling the irritation and the anger, I've just learned to, like, you know what, pursuing that, letting that control what you say next is not going to help. So just, it's learning when to just not say anything and move along.
It's funny you say that, because I was saying in another episode, and just been figuring this out myself, that one of the biggest advantages that I or skills I have at work is to be selective in what I say. And one of the problems I run into in real life is that I'm not so selective. I just start blathering at the mouth, which gets me in a lot of trouble. So yeah, being selective, and I think in action, not flaring up, not actually just taking a step back.
Yeah,
definitely.
That was one of the biggest things. Now that we're talking about this, that I remember learning, and I don't know when. At some point in my life, I realized, oh, you don't have to respond to everything. It's like, not responding is sometimes a better and more productive response. And for the longest time, I would always think, well, if they said something, I have to say something. And it wasn't trying to have the last word, or at least not consciously. It was just feeling like it was impolite somehow to not acknowledge what the person said, but also carrying forward the discussion. And sometimes it's just not fruitful, just let them be right.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase, it's better to be kind than right, that kind of thing. Like, there's no point in sticking to that.
Well, I think we as human beings, we want to be right. I think that's just natural. And so it feels like if you don't respond, if you don't contradict, if you don't come to a conclusion where you either see why the other person is right or they agree that you're right, that then something is left unresolved in the world, and things aren't right in the world, and we must come to that conclusion. And that's a lie. The fact is that a lot of times you may have already convinced the other person, or they may have even already convinced you, and the two of you haven't realized it until you stop and reflect on it later. I mean, that was a big revelation for me. And again, I don't have examples of when, but at some point I realized I was having an argument with somebody, and I just stopped, and I'm like, okay, fine. And I was feeling like, I didn't convince them. They still think, and then later on they would express the opinion that I had been arguing for, because what they didn't want to do is admit that I was right in the discussion. but I had convinced them and they came around to it later. So, and vice versa. I'm not saying like I always won that way. Sometimes I would do that. I would stop and like, well, I'm not going to convince them. And then later on go, huh, you know what? Actually, they're kind of right. And there's been a lot of articles recently about this in regards to just online arguments, people on the internet arguing. You are much more likely to persuade someone if you admit part of what they're saying is right than you are if you just try to show them facts why they're wrong. They'll just resist it.
Yeah, the other thing is, for me, I've been thinking, like, it's been a while now, that I can have an opinion, that I like something, and you can have a different opinion, and it doesn't affect me in the least. As in, not like, oh, it would be nice if you liked the same thing I did, but it doesn't make what I'm enjoying any worse. You know, just because I have an iPhone, you have an Android phone, let's fight about that. That's pointless.
Especially, I run into that with TV shows a lot. Do you? Where you're like, oh, I really like this show, and they're like, no, that show is awful.
I watch pro wrestling, so come on, right there, that will explain to you. Like, you watch pro wrestling, you seem really smart. That starts many a discussion. So yes, I can relate.
Or music's the same thing. It's like, what, you like that band? And it's like, you know what? There's room in this world for us all to like different things. It's totally cool.
Yeah, when it comes to TV shows, there's a lot of pressure to like, okay, you haven't watched that? You haven't watched that? I'm like, no, I was at the auto show with my son. Like, I was experiencing some life. I wasn't, I didn't know that there was a throne with like swords on it. I missed it. I'm sorry I missed out the shared culture that we all have.
What? You're insane.
Let's talk a bit about that. You're into all kinds of nerdery, okay? I'm very particular in the nerdery that I'm in, right? Like, I like science fiction. I'm not so big into wizards and warriors kinds of stuff. If you put an elf, like they put an elf in Thor too, and I was like, no, not an elf. No, I'll buy the magic. I'll buy the Norse stuff, but not an elf, please. Dark elves.
What are you, an orc?
See,
on elves.
So I wasn't exactly into that stuff, but like fitting in at times, I think is very difficult. Especially like I thought I was a nerd when I was a kid. And then as I've gotten older, I'm moving away from certain nerdy things. And I'm finding other ones. How do you, I guess not fit in, how do you feel about not fitting into, I guess, one particular group?
Yeah. This is something that I learned from my wife. And it's not that I didn't know it before, but she really turned me around to be comfortable with liking popular things. And to me, it's just as bad to pretend you don't like something that's popular so that you look cool as it is to like something that's popular just because it's popular, right? I mean, for the longest time, I was like, okay, I don't want to look uncool by liking this thing, right? Maybe it was a nerdy thing, or maybe it was a popular thing, but I need to like the cool. I need to be seen to like the cool things, and it turns out like that's just as pretentious and just as annoying as just being honest and saying, "God, you know what? Maybe I like One Direction. I don't, but if I did, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I actually like Jennifer Lopez songs. There's a better example. Like, I honestly like them, and I don't care. Like, if you, oh, what? How can you? Her voice is off. Like, you know what? This isn't me liking her because she's hugely popular. I just like, I want to be. I came to a point where like it's okay to just say, you know what? That I like that. It's fine. And I don't like it because of the other people liking it. That's why there's always the backlash against popular stuff. And I think nerdy stuff is becoming that way. I guess that's the point I'm trying to get around to, is like elves and superheroes and things that were once unpopular and like, oh, nerdy, are now massively popular. And so it's that same kind of pressure of like, hey, Ayaz, you have to like what we like.
Yeah, I was also, with your musical example, I basically had to give in to the fact Lady Gaga music, okay, it speaks to me. I can't do anything about it. I enjoy it, and it's fun.
There's nothing wrong with that, yeah.
Right. But like, it's so uncool. It's like, you like this pop music, you like the Beatles, you like real music. I'm like, she can really work. This is some good stuff here. So like, I can't choose that.
Stephanie Germanotta can sing.
She her poker face on the piano. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me trying to convince you, audience, that it's not completely lame. It doesn't matter if it's completely lame.
Well, and that's the point, right? Like, I get that being a sheep and liking X boy band / X girl band just because it's massively marketed and it's not very good is is something that I don't value either. Like that mass culture of like, oh, you only like the Bay City Rollers because they plastered their names and their faces on every teen magazine out there, right? To steal an example from the 1970s. But that doesn't mean that if you find yourself singing along to Saturday Night that it's bad. So don't like something just because everyone likes it, but don't not like something just because everyone else likes it. Just be honest and like what you like. If you don't like elves, it's fine, Ayaz.
I'm really glad that you said that. Now I have approval. So you heard it here. I have approval not to like elves. But I don't like
that's
elves.
what I'm saying is you don't need approval. You don't like elves, you don't like elves.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like for me to try to fit in to everything that what used to be classified as. I mean, I was an X-Men nerd, right? So that's very particular. And that's got all kinds of magic, cosmic, other nonsense going on there too. But it's just, what you like. And I would be ostracized for that in school, and you'd fit in with that little nerdy group, and then it obviously changed a lot. Changing gears, I wanted to ask you about this too. Now, your wife works at YouTube, and
yes.
That's one of the reasons why. One of the
She's actually upstairs listening to One Direction, which is why I brought up that. Isn't it?
One of the bigger reasons why you're in Los Angeles now. How are you adjusting to the fact that she's like in New York a lot? I just saw that she was in Tokyo. She's traveling a lot. How does that impact you, and how do you like deal with that?
That's a good question. Because she didn't travel a lot for a long time. And I was always the one traveling. And it was usually weekend stuff. Like I would go to BayCon or DragonCon or Nerdtacular, and she couldn't make it. So it was different, especially when she went to New York. I have never liked being away from her since we got together, and vice versa. But when I travel, there's always something to distract me from it, right? I don't think of it all the time. And so being at home in the normal routine was weird. One thing about the way we construct our lives is that I'm working from home all day. So all day I'm in the house without her. That actually helped a little because parts of my evening it would just feel like, oh, she's just working late. Where it really bummed me out was I wanted to like go to one of our favorite restaurants or head out to a place where we like to go and just walk around or shop. Mostly what we do together is eat. And I couldn't do that with her. And I was like, well, I don't even know if I want to do it. It's not any fun to do it alone. So yeah, I had to just kind of distract myself. And I worked and watched a lot of TV. And of course I went out to New York for a week, and that's when I saw you. And that helped to be able to say like, okay, well, it's not going to be an entire month. When she went to Japan, I was going to South by Southwest for Austin for part of that. So again, I was gone and distracted quite a bit. So it hasn't been awful, and it's only been those couple of trips so far that are very far and very extended.
Yeah, Liz, her entire family's in California. Well, not entire, some of them in Chicago. And she's been visiting the past couple of, she's here now, but she was gone for a couple of days. And it's just weird for me because it's one thing where I would be sent for a trip to Las Vegas. Or we're going to go to CES because that's what you do and you're busy all day. So you're not really thinking like,
oh yeah, especially something like CES where you don't even have time to think about yourself.
You're like, oh, is there food here? Good, whatever, just whatever it is.
I live at CES now.
Yeah, this is my trailer. This is my seat. I'm happy. But there's that weird feeling of you come home, you're like, okay, this is odd. And okay, now what? What do you do? And that for me was very odd because she's going out to California where her family is, and that's a huge support structure. And then she has to come back, and I was terrified. I mean, I'll be honest about it. I was like, she's gonna come back, and like it's just me and two dogs, and the dogs are very supportive, and I'm working on it.
Wait, hold on, back up a second. She's gonna come back, and it'll be just you and the two dogs. That's
the support structure because her family's all in California.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So she's gonna have this support structure. She's gonna come back and realize like, all I have are these two dogs and Ayaz.
Yeah, and I mean, and as good as the dogs are at being supportive, I don't think they match the family thing. And so that had me freaked out. And I actually had, like, this was something that got me a lot of, just caused a lot of grief for me. And I was like, okay, what do I got to do? Like, okay, I should just talk to her about it. This is a crazy idea I had. Because normally I would just try to go, nah, you're being stupid. You really shouldn't worry about it, to myself and hope that everything would be fine. But I had to talk about it because to me that was like, okay, well, I just ripped her away from California and now what happens? that was very odd. So I mean, with your situation, it's all travel for business, but this thing is like kind of inverted. So just looking for some what's that insight for that one?
Yeah, and her family, what's weird is like a lot of my wife's family are in the LA area, but not near us. So we don't see them very often. In fact, we see her immediate family, her dad and her sister, more often, but they're way up in San Jose. Um, but she would have to go up there to see them, or they have to go down here. So it's different than when we both lived in the Bay Area. She could just kind of drive down whenever, Father's Days and all that sort of thing. That's kind of new for her, is to have to travel to see her family too. Not as far, obviously. Yeah, it's any of those kinds of things that freak you out. It's really easy to start cascading through like, okay, well, what happens if she gets home and realizes the missing sports director and then does this? And then all of a sudden you're having an argument about something that hasn't happened. So I find that helps me a lot to realize, wait, let me worry about the things that have actually happened first, and not catastrophize about the things that haven't quite yet. I can't stop myself from thinking about them and preparing for them, but at least I've gotten to where I can say, but it's silly to get upset about it when it hasn't happened. So just trying to step back a little.
Yeah. So spoiler alert, that all worked out and everything's fine. And we're, but yeah,
she's in the studio, so I assume.
Liz is right over here, so like everything worked out great, and we talked about it, and everything's going very well. But that was something that the idea of don't live a fictionalized life that you haven't had yet. So like what actually happened, and that I've thought has actually led me to a lot of relaxation, if you believe that. Me relaxing.
Have you ever done that thing where you like have an entire argument with someone in your head that they don't know about, and then you feel resentful because you made up their side of the argument?
Yeah, it's like, I can't believe you would say that to me. It's like, but you didn't.
I can't believe it's possible that should we have really had that conversation, you would have said that to me.
That's like having being angry after a dream. I've had that a couple of times where I've woken up and I was like, and I was like, what are you doing? In my head, I didn't say anything out loud. I was just like, I can't believe she did that in my dream. Like, she has nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing to do with it. So there's some piece of advice there. That's another thing that we were talking about, being selective. Something I've told my therapist is like, I said this phrase and he was like, this is really good, I want to write it down, which I thought was really weird. I said, I don't have to give every dumb idea I have a voice. It's like, just because I think it doesn't mean I got to say it. So I can think all kinds of horrible things, but the secret in like having a happy day is to make sure that you didn't say too much of it. You just say a couple of things and things work out.
Yeah. That is something that I find intriguing. We all have different levels of natural anxiety, right? It's something I've noticed in myself and a lot of friends. Like certain things will happen to two people and they'll have very different reactions. And I feel like one of them just has a naturally higher level of anxiety. So adding that much more anxiety just set them over the top. And that's a really clever way of dealing with it, to say, let me not prioritize those anxious voices in my head.
How are you at compartmentalizing things in your head?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty good at it. Like, what do you mean? Give me an example.
Well, I mean, treating things all fact-based and trying to keep things orderly in your brain, I guess. I mean, I was told recently, and this is by a professional, saying you compartmentalize too much. And because of that, I'm very logical and detached when it comes to certain kinds of emotions, because I'm like, well, it should fit in here. This is logical, right? Like, this is not that offensive because it's just logical. So I guess because of that, I don't have this idea of stepping back and going, oh, wait a minute, there's a bigger picture.
Yeah, I definitely have a natural way of distancing myself from certain things, sometimes to my detriment, like you're saying. Where people are like, you are you're suppressing your emotions. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I am, but I'm not doing it on purpose. And it's actually served me well in doing what I do, to be able to look at a news story and say, okay, like I'm not a fan of Apple or Android, so let me break down like, okay, these are the facts. It can be a problem in real life when someone is having an emotional reaction and you respond with logic, because they don't care. That person doesn't care about the logic of the situation. So I've made an extra effort to try to say to people, you're totally legitimate in feeling that way. Like I find myself, especially in conversations with Eileen, when she talks about work or relationships with friends or whatever, and she's like, oh, I'm so mad because of this. I'm like, absolutely right. You're 100% right to feel that way, but keep in mind on the other side of things. And then you can do the logical argument. It really is amazingly helpful to just validate to someone, and I like it when it's done to me too. Like, it's not a trick. It's just like, yeah, okay, good. I'm not crazy for feeling that way, but don't let that feeling guide your action because there's these other things to consider.
See, that's where I got in trouble too, because one of my main therapist when I was in California was saying basically everything I thought, because I was very narcissistic and I thought, oh, somebody did something, it was a personal thing against me. It basically told me, like, what you're feeling is wrong. I was like, whoa, okay, nobody really tells me that. And most people tell you to, validate a feeling and kind of like own it and that kind of thing. But I've heard a lot of well-adjusted people like you, Tom, saying to, validate feelings and to like take them into note. And I'm not trying to talk down anybody, but everyone seems to be like a big key. Like it's weird for me to be able to go to somebody, your feelings are okay, when I was told, no, like that doesn't work.
Well, but you're also turning this into being about what you were told again, and you're right to feel that way. I get that. No, all joking aside, it is different. I don't know why that person would say you're wrong to feel that way, but it's different to say you're right to feel that way versus I understand why you feel that way. It's a subtle difference, but it's a big one, right? You could theoretically say to you, yeah, that's not a proper or accurate reaction. You shouldn't feel that this person is being that way. But at the same time, you could say, I understand why you feel that way. I understand the thought processes that are going through your head. And that's what validates it. And then I think it's actually more impactful. I hate saying more impactful. I think it has more impact to say, I understand how you could feel that way. I understand how you got there, but that's actually not what's going on. And so your feeling isn't an accurate one because X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to like distinguish the difference a bit. It's going to take me a while to wrap my head around that.
It's one thing. Okay, so let's say, Sarah Lane comes in to the Tech News Today set and slams down her keyboard and is like, who moved my stuff around? And it would be easy and then I turn to you later and go like, wow, Sarah was really mad at me. And then you say to me, totally get why you would think that because you were sitting there waiting for her, looking at her. She came in and she got upset about things being moved around on her desk, right? I get why you think that she's mad at you, but you're wrong. She's not mad at you. She's actually just irritated because she had a long drive and the traffic was bad and some stuff was moved around on her desk. It has nothing to do with you. That's an example of, I get why you felt that because the anger was radiating and everything, but take a look at it from the other side and you'll see that you're mistaken. Does that help?
That definitely does, because I can't be like, no, you're wrong, Tom. It's like, no, I see. It's weird because in that example, it's a really easy one of like for me to understand. I'd be like, she probably came in. Didn't you see her like her Twitter stream that she was stuck in traffic and whatever? And
right.
Like, oh exactly. yeah, that's right. That's how that would actually go down. That is a good one. Now I'm stuck in that stuff, and I got to think about that for a while. Let's switch gears entirely. How do you not go stir crazy? You're at home all day, all the time, and they never let you out for air. Your dogs don't take you out. How do you not go stir crazy?
No, I go out. That's actually the key is not to shut myself in. For one thing, I'm lucky enough to live in a place that has 2 levels. So when I go down to do my show, I'm in a different environment. And I don't spend a lot of time down here when I'm not doing a show on purpose so that I associate this with being a different place. Like this is going to work, right? The other thing I do is I make sure I force myself to get up and take breaks, and I force myself to leave the house at least once a day, which sounds ridiculous, but there are some days where it's like, hey, I don't have to go anywhere, and I take the dogs for a walk at very minimum, or I go for a run. And the other thing I do is I'm pretty solidly preparing for Daily Tech News Show from about 10 a.m., 10 to 10:30 up until showtime at 1:30. And to make myself not go stir crazy doing that, I schedule a dog break in the backyard at 12 o'clock. And I make myself get up and get away. And it's 10 minutes. It's not very long. 10 minutes is the longest, of just letting them outside. It's good for them. They get a little outside, get their break, get their stuff done. And it pulls me away and refreshes my brain. So I take some very active steps on purpose to make sure that I'm not just sitting in the same room all the time. And granted, I'm lucky enough to have a situation where I can do that.
Yeah, scheduling breaks, I think, and actually scheduling downtime, or like things that will make you feel better, definitely work. Since you are me in the future, and I just got the top 5 job.
I'm totally not you in the future. I mean, I get why you say that, because you took my old job from CNET doing
Twice.
the homepage, and now you're doing, videos and podcasts and all of that stuff. And I get that. I get it. But we understand each other. But you're your own person, I guess.
Very aware, but you seem to adjust. It seems like you've adjusted to most of the crap I've had to, I'm learning to adjust to still. So I like getting that insight of okay, what is the trick on this? How do you act as human as you do? And I mean, I'm not going to be from the Midwest. Right, as you are not human, as it's clear. I mean, you've adjusted, you've done the big moves, for work, and you've done a lot of, you've gone to just being independent and all these other, these are giant, tumultuous changes, and you seem to handle them just fine. I would think they would be tumultuous. Maybe they'd go really smooth for you. You're laughing about
Always show a calm face. That's the key. I don't know, man. I just wing it. I'll be honest. I really don't know. Sometimes I look back, especially on, series of events. There was a series of events in the early part of the 2000s where, how'd it go? It was, got married, lost my job, wife's mom died, my dad died, all in the period of 2 years. All the huge stressful events all happened at once. And I just coped, I just tried to figure out from day to day, okay, let's just focus on what needs to be done next. And same thing. And I guess part of it is having experiences like that. Then the next time it's I moved cities and lost a job, but that was it. It wasn't so bad in retrospect. And let's take the most recent thing where I changed jobs and I had to start a bunch of stuff over from scratch. And it was very stressful. I was also just moved. So I'm still in that kind of post-move new city stress. The way I got through that was just focusing on what had to be done that day. And I have my own organizational system for that. And I just laser focus, look, all you can do are these things. And anything else that you can't do right now, don't worry about it. Just follow the list. Do the things that you can do. And then tomorrow get up and do the things that you can do that day. And that really helped me.
Do you ever suffer from over planning? Do you just sometimes think, okay, this plan's way too in depth? Or how do you keep track about the actual action items you're going to be doing?
Yeah, well, that has been a long time because I used to be a organizational nightmare, and yeah, I would overplan and underprepare sometimes, or overprepare and therefore not do other things that I should have done because I was too busy preparing for this other thing. The system that I have now is basically calendar based. I adapted a lot of things from getting things done, but I have a task list that is repeatable for the most part because most of my things are repeatable. I have regularly scheduled shows. And then I add in certain things as they come up, oh, you need to do that, you need to do that. And then I just roll through them every day. I'm okay, I have to get all these tasks done. And the thing that I've taken to doing more recently is saying, I need to schedule time for certain kinds of events. Even though they're just a task that can be done at any time, it makes a difference if you block out that time. You're look, instead of just write the scripts for Tech Republic, realize that you pretty consistently need 90 minutes to 2 hours to write those scripts is what it ends up being. So don't just put it on the task list, block out 2 hours so that you have plenty of time to do it. And that lowers your stress level. And then you tend to not sit there and spend all your time figuring out what to do each day because I've got a system now that kind of automatically does that for me.
It's odd that you bring up calendaring. That's basically, I also read GTD and I got the action items thing and I've just been scheduling things in general because I found if I didn't set a time for it, it just wouldn't get done or get pushed off or whatever. But because just to come up with the idea of like, actually, how much time is this going to take? Not only that, I'm setting up an appointment with myself to do it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
oh yeah, sure, I'm free that time. Like, wait a second, no, I was actually supposed to eat lunch today. This is actually used to happen to me a lot, where I would forget to eat when I was working from home because I was so wrapped up in work. I'm like, you got to really schedule time to eat because you end up.
Yeah, I did that. I scheduled in at 11 o'clock. It's one of my breaks, actually. 11 o'clock a.m. I get up. It's between when I've done the first draft of the headlines and I start researching my story. I get up and I get my lunch. And then I eat it while I research, but still, it's part of the routine.
Yeah, so definitely. So that's interesting. So I've been doing something before you have. So, yay.
Hey, see, you're me 6 months from now.
You're going to get a really dark tan. I'm sorry to tell you that.
It's LA. It's going to happen.
So let's see. You moved. What was that like culture shock wise? I mean, you moved to California for a job, right?
Yeah.
Did you explain that way back when? I'm not talking about this LA job.
99. Well, here's the thing. I lived in Greenville, Illinois from 1970 when I was born there until 1988. I'm not gonna go through all of those 18 years. And then 88, I moved up to Champaign, Illinois, to go to University of Illinois. The first summer, I went back to Greenville for the summer, but after that, I pretty much stayed in Champaign. Then I went from there to Arlington, Virginia, for an internship at Washington D.C. Lived in Washington D.C. Then went back to Champaign briefly for the summer, down to Austin. Lived in Austin from 93 to 99, then San Francisco. By the time I moved to San Francisco, moving to a new place wasn't as big of a deal. I'd done it before. Moving to a place that big, I had kind of done in Washington, D.C., but only for a short period of time. So it was ridiculously stressful. It's probably the hardest thing that I've done in my life was take that risk, take that big jump, move into San Francisco at a time when you could not buy an apartment. Like you would show up at a listing and it would already be gone because somebody showed up earlier with cash. It was ridiculous. And I was doing a job that I found incredibly intimidating, working for a television network, working for a real website that people looked at. And I remember there was one night I was living in the place that I had rented. I'd rented a room with a bunch of roommates on Crescent Drive in the Mission, North Mission, and almost into the Bernal Heights area, if you know it. And I remember laying down like, I can't do this. I was just laying down to go to sleep. I'm like, I don't think I can do this. And I just kind of stopped myself and I'm like, well, you can either quit or you can just try anyway. And I'm like, it was the conversation I had with myself. I'm like, all right, what do I have to lose? If I fall flat on my face, I can always go back to half-price books and just sell books. You know, I did it for 6 years. What's the worst that could happen? And that moment really has stuck with me since. Everything I do from then on, it's like, well, you can always go back to slinging books. You can always find something else to do. And that's a lie. I mean, obviously, there are cases where people get thrown out of a job and they can't find anything else to do. But it was just kind of a comfortable security blanket to realize, I've been really only having $50 a month for groceries, barely enough to pay rent before. So the fact that I'm doing better than that is progress. And I can, if I survived doing that in the past, I can keep going doing this.
Yeah, we used to joke about that at some place we used to work about, like, oh yeah, we could always go back to doing something else. So
yeah,
here we are.
And it's a key to taking risks and being able to try new things is to not worry that you're going to lose everything if you do.
Yeah, what I found is that for some reason I handle uncertainty pretty easily, which is very odd. Like I'm like, I have no idea what's coming up next. It's like, well, I don't know how to even react because
that's something that I hate uncertainty. I really do. Like that is a difference between us because I want to know where things are going. And once I know where things are going, then I can relax. But like not having something scheduled, not having like a lineup, that's why I so over prepare my shows is I want to know that I can fall back on all of that stuff.
I do that for certain things. I call it idiot proofing for myself.
Yeah.
Where the worst version of me who's exhausted at 2 a.m, can this guy, let's say an early morning flight, can this guy survive, pick up a bag and go? So I'll set it up really easy that way. But for oddly giant things. I'm just like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll move to New York after living in California for a couple of years. What could go wrong? Like,
Yeah.
what's the big deal?
I feel a little more like that now just because yeah, I have moved to this and maybe that's an advantage of growing up in New York. Like you grew up in the biggest city in the US, right? There's nowhere to go but down for you. Whereas I grew up in one of the smallest. And so moving like now that I've been in LA, I'm like, well, this is the second biggest city. I've been to New York a bunch of times. Like, okay, yeah, there's Mumbai and there's Mexico City out there, there's bigger places out there, but honestly, like I don't feel like the moving apart, whether it's because of the size of the place or just the stress of moving bothers me, but that's only because I've done it a few times.
Yeah, and also moving back to New York, it's like for me personally, I grew up in Queens. I'm at GFQ right now, and I'm living in Manhattan, and I've lived in Manhattan like as an adult in a long like for a while. I've maybe lived there when I was in school, but I never really saw Manhattan. I was always studying, so I had no freaking idea what was going on. I didn't know I lived between Chinatown and Little Italy. I literally had no idea. I was on Mulberry Street. It's the border. That's how much I was working, and I just always figured out here, like, it doesn't matter if you don't fit in. You're going to find people to fit in with here because everyone here is weird. Like, it's completely normal to be weird. I don't know. That's kind of odd to say.
Yeah, well, it's like the internet, but in real life.
Yeah, it's kind of what New York is. I mean, I remember being on BART or like anything in San Francisco. You'll see somebody who's just slightly out of whack or like in a spiked mohawk or something. And you're like, people like elbow you like, do you see that person? I'm like, yeah, that's fine, like, but what's the big deal? Like, it's
that's a person.
Yeah, it's normalized in New York. You just kind of get used to that kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess I got lucky that way because my folks. This is a story. I don't know if I've ever told you this. Even my folks, my parents are from Pakistan, and they were deciding where to move to. And my dad basically had like a book because there's no internet. He had a book, and he's like looking through different cities, and he starts off with A's. And he's like, I can be in Alaska. He starts looking at things like Arkansas. He's looking at states and the cities within. So I could have ended up in Alaska or Arkansas or like
Anchorage, and
I'm like, oh boy, that would have been very different. But thankfully, my mom's father, my grandfather, had a Photoshop studio in New York. So they had
Photoshop studio,
an actual photo studio. So like they actually did. Like,
You said Photoshop. Okay,
I meant to say because they actually did airbrushing on stuff. So I think I thought Photoshop like
he had an actual Photoshop.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, what you said is actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it's perfectly accurate. It's just funny given Adobe.
Right. So my mom used to like work on airbrushing things, and my grandfather owned this photo studio, and they take photos of people because this is what you did. And back in the day, to clean up an image, you literally airbrushed them. That's not just a term; it's an actual thing.
Like he'd use an airbrush.
Yeah,
yeah.
And my mom was very good at it. That was what she did when she was a teenager. So like, that helped us get to New York. But like, it's very odd. And I also got to grow up with a good story with my dad telling me that when he came to this country, and he was a doctor in Pakistan already. He came to this country and he had to wait for take the boards to be a licensed physician out here. And so he needed money. So he took a job as a clerk. And every day he was there, his bosses would be like, you seem kind of bright to be a clerk. And he's like, thank you. He would never say anything about he's a real doctor. And then eventually he quits. And they're like, why? He goes, I'm going to be a doctor now. They're like, what?
Because you're huh?
Yeah, he's basically Batman. There he goes. He's off being a doctor. And it's like, okay, that was pretty cool. So like just to have that bit of humility, that story from my folks telling me like, oh yeah, we could have lived in Alaska and your dad was a clerk. It's like, wow, did not know.
Well, and that's such a good example of when to not say more than you need to say, right? Like my impulse, in my 20s would have been if somebody's like, you seem real bright to be a doctor, to be like, yeah, well, see, but the thing is, I'm from Pakistan. I moved, I want to take them aboard, tell this long story, right? It was just so much cleaner and easier to say, thank you. Because then you acknowledge the person, they feel good, like, oh yeah, you took the compliment. That's great. But then you don't have to get into the complications of explaining your life to somebody.
That's also why at where I work right now, a lot of folks are like, you were a lawyer? I get yelled at about that. I'm like, yeah, I don't bring it up because I don't see why it should come up. And they're like, because you're a lawyer. I'm like, why are we yelling? I don't care. Like, I work here now.
Yeah.
I don't work in the legal department. So
you should just tell them to cease and desist.
The
yell.
On that note, Tom, if people wanted to find you online, or if you
After
wanted,
that,
if you wanted to tell anybody anything, ever, now's your chance because you'll never be online ever again.
sure. No, thank you for this opportunity. TomMerritt.com, 2 R's, 2 T's, is my website that has all of my projects. It's all in there if you poke around. But if you like tech news, dailytechnewsshow.com. If you like conversations like this, I do a usually monthly, it's kind of a regular show with Roger Chang called East Meets West, and do a bunch of other shows about pop culture, geeky stuff, tech stuff. So yeah, if you're interested, TomMerritt.com.
Yeah, and Tom's the best in the business when it comes to tech news, and also this guy's been a mentor to me for a while. So thanks for doing that, by the way. It's been been very helpful.
So it was a two-way street. It was very helpful to be able to work with you, and I'm glad that we continue to find ways to collaborate now. It's awesome.
It's always an excuse just to talk. Otherwise, we'd be like arguing over like Twitter or something.
No, we wouldn't.
No, it's not possible. It's not.
Yes.
It's not a good enough medium, I think.
I was trying to argue with you.
No, I was going with Twitter's the wrong medium. I'm arguing with myself right now. Excuse me.
Twitter and Medium have the same founder.
Anyway, yeah. So occasionally I'm on Daily Tech News Show, so you can watch that, and I'll be there.
Yeah,
and we talk.
we would like to have Ayaz more, by the way, but he's got a lot going on, so we try to get him on as much as we can without imposing. It's very good. It's very kind of you to come on as often as you do.
And I actually will be able to increase that, and we'll talk about that later. Anyway, that does it for us. And if you want to see more episodes and you want to see how often I have failed at finding peace and what I'm actually doing to be somewhat successful, I'm not totally putting myself down here. I've grown a lot over the past 7 years to, get a little bit more level-headed and patient and trying to understand people. And I am way more calm. If you knew me at 20, you wouldn't like me at 20. But I'm 35 now, so things are good. You can watch old episodes at gfqnetwork.com. We've got a whole bunch of stuff, including Tom and our original discussion a while ago, a long time ago, and now this episode. So you'll have all of those back to back to back to back. We've had Liz Romero on, we've had Andrew Zarian on, we've had Strickland on, Jonathan Strickland. We've had lots of people. Tim Stevens, lots of folks with lots of insights. So hope you get some help out of this. And if you didn't, let's keep trying. It'll be okay. And that does it for us. I'm Ayaz Akhtar.